Okay, so let's get right into this. We're going to be talking about a really old story about a town that was, completely blessed. They had everything they could possibly want. And then they were given just one single test. But it was how they handled that test, this really clever loophole they found, that ended up sealing their fate in, well, a truly shocking way.
And yeah, that brings us right to the main question here, doesn't it? It sounds kind of crazy, almost like a myth or a fairy tale. But the reason behind it is so human and, honestly, surprisingly relevant to today. So, what could a whole group of people do that was so bad they were literally turned into apes? Let's break it down.
So, to start, you have to picture this. Our story is about a community from the Bani Israel, and they're living this perfect life in a town right by the sea. They were doing well, they felt safe. By every measure, they were incredibly blessed.
And what's really important to get here is just how safe they were. This wasn't just about having money. It was about this deep sense of peace. They were protected from all sides, They had a life that was totally free from the kind of worries that kept other people up at night.
And then came the test. And it was just one rule, super simple and direct. On Saturday, the Sabbath, they had to stop all work. And for these people living by the sea, that meant one thing above all: no fishing. The whole day was supposed to be just for worship. Simple enough, right? Well, here's the catch. This test was designed to be a real test of their faith. See, on any other day of the week, fishing was just normal. But on Saturday, the one day they were told not to fish, the sea would just come alive with tons of huge, amazing fish. They were swimming right up to the shore, almost like they were begging to be caught. The temptation must have been unbelievable.
And for a while, they actually held out. But, seeing all that opportunity just swim away day after day, it got to be too much. Whispers started going around the town, people started complaining, and that's when they went from just being tempted to actually scheming, trying to find a clever way to get what they wanted without technically breaking the rule.
And this right here, this just perfectly captures how they were thinking. It's that classic self-deception, In their own minds, they weren't disobeying. No. They were just being smart. They were just finding a little workaround that let them get what they wanted while still looking like they were following the rules. So, here's the plan they cooked up. On Friday, the day before the Sabbath, they'd go out and dig these big channels from the sea leading to pools on the shore. They'd set up their nets in there. Then, on Saturday, when all those fish came swarming in, they'd get washed into the pools and trapped. The people didn't have to lift a finger. Then, on Sunday, they could just walk out and collect this massive, effortless haul.
So you see, the justification was everything. They could stand there and say, hey, we didn't fish on the Sabbath, and technically, they didn't. They didn't cast a single net on Saturday. They followed the letter of the law while completely, totally ignoring its spirit, which was to set the day aside for God, not to engineer a giant fish trap.
Now, as you can imagine, this whole scheme didn't just happen in a vacuum. It completely tore the town apart. It basically split everyone into 3 different groups, all based on how they reacted to this clever plan. So first up, you had the ones who were all in. These are the people digging the trenches, setting the nets, and patting each other on the back for being so smart. They didn't see themselves as sinners at all. They thought they were innovators who had figured out a solution to their problem. They were really proud of their little trick.
Then you had the complete opposite. This was the righteous group, the ones who saw this whole thing for exactly what it was, a total deception. They were the ones actively speaking out, going through the town and warning everyone, saying, stop, you're making a mockery of God's command. You're going to bring ruin on all of us.
And finally, there was that third group. You could call them the silent ones. They didn't join in on the sin, but they didn't say anything against it either. Their whole attitude was just, hey, mind your own business. They kept to themselves, basically saying, this is between them and God. Why should we get involved?
So, the warnings from the righteous group, they fell on deaf ears. The sinners celebrated their big catches, the silent group just watched from a distance, and the split in the town just got wider and wider. And then, one quiet night, after all the warnings had stopped and the sinners were fast asleep, judgment came.
There wasn't a storm, or an earthquake, or fire raining from the sky. Nothing like that. It was just a calm, terrifying command. A divine decree was made, and it sealed the fate of everyone who chose their clever tricks over sincere devotion. And inside their homes, while they were sleeping, this awful transformation started. And it happened quietly.
Their fingers started to change, hair grew all over their bodies, and their human voices were replaced by the panicked shrieks and chatters of apes. When the sun came up the next day, the righteous and the silent people came out of their houses into this strange quiet. They went to check on their neighbors, climbing over the walls to peek into their yards. And what they saw, it was unbelievable. The people were just gone. And in their place were apes, still wearing their human clothes.
So, what happened next, the aftermath of all this, is really where the true lesson of the story starts to become clear. This wasn't just about punishment. It was about revealing the real nature of their crime and giving a warning that would last forever.
And this is where the true tragedy hits you. These transformed apes, they still had their human minds. They recognized their own family members, clinging to their clothes and just weeping. And when the righteous people asked them, "Didn't we warn you this would happen?" the apes could only nod their heads. But they were trapped in those bodies. They refused to eat or drink anything, and within 3 days, they all died.
And this right here gets to the absolute heart of it. In the end, they weren't punished for eating fish. They were punished for their intention. Their real crime was using legalistic trickery, using the fine print of the law to completely defeat its purpose. It was an act of incredible arrogance.
Okay, so this isn't just some dusty old story. The whole reason it's told over and over again is because that core temptation, the temptation to be clever instead of being sincere, that's a human struggle that has never gone away. The story basically holds up a mirror to our own lives.
And this just lays it out so perfectly, right? Back then, they used a loophole for fishing. Today, someone might call a bribe a gift or a consulting fee. They justified their greed by being clever. Today, we might justify charging crazy interest by calling it profit. They came up with a deception, and today, we might call a lie a marketing technique. The words change, but the self-deception, it's exactly the same game.
And really, the whole story leaves us with this powerful, inescapable truth. You can play all the word games you want, you can build these complex justifications for yourself, but you can't trick the one who knows what's really in your heart. The form of what we do matters so much less than the sincerity behind it.
And that's the question this whole story just leaves hanging in the air for us. It kind of forces us to look at our own lives, our jobs, our money, our relationships, and just ask, where am I using a loophole? Where am I following the letter of the law, but totally violating its spirit? It's a tough question, for sure, but it's one this ancient story demands that we try to answer.